Hey, Deserving listeners, let's continue watching the video on YouTube called Andrew Tate Goes to Therapy on the Cobra Conquer YouTube channel. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Let's see what happens and see what comes flying out of my face as I watch.
That's the place that they want to get you, because there's definitely an energy out there. They want to get you.
Oh no, they're out to get me.
Yeah.
It's I don't think that's the reason why, though.
Well, depends who we're talking about.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the Matrix. I understand why they're, and you've talked about that a lot in podcasts. We could talk about that, you know, because you are speaking a lot of truth, and you're confronting all the lies in the culture, and you're speaking against the most powerful forces in the world.
Okay, I know nothing about David. I can't remember his full name now. Was it Sutcliffe? I know nothing about him. I only know him from a character that he played on the Gilmore Girls show. So I don't know. Throughout this whole video, I've been wondering, does he agree with Andrew Tate's philosophies, or is he just really good at having that therapist mode? You know, I said in an earlier video, if I were treating someone like Andrew Tate and you watched a video of the session, you wouldn't necessarily know if I agreed or disagreed with the client, because therapy is bigger or different than having a typical conversation where it's expected. You know, if I'm in a conversation with a friend and they were to say something, or not a friend, but if I were to have a conversation with a random person and they were to say something like, well, you know, feminists are so stupid, and I didn't say something in opposition to that, then it could be interpreted that I agree with it, right? It depends on the situation. But whereas as a therapist, clients say all sorts of things that I don't agree with, but I'm playing the long game. And if I'm going to play the long game and be helpful, which is what I'm ethically supposed to be doing, then I strategically make decisions about things like that. Is it important for me to push back on that? That needs to change for various reasons, but is it going to actually result in change if I disagree with it in any sort of form right now? Or will it cause the relationship to crumble and the client leaves and never goes back to therapy? What good was that, right? So from the very beginning, I've been watching and wondering where David, the therapist, is with what Andrew Tate's spouting and what his, you know, philosophies are. And I don't know why, but I was just giving him the benefit of the doubt that he is a normal human being who thinks normal things and doesn't think things like Andrew Tate does. And I don't know why I thought that. I wondered, because why would even Andrew Tate want David in his life if that were true? But I didn't know. Maybe David just never revealed, or who knows. Some people are pretty flexible or easygoing. They're not particularly opinionated. So I didn't know. But then I think we're starting to hear now that David does agree with what Andrew Tate has been spouting for many years. So that's disappointing.
But individual women, let's say, they're going to look at what you're doing, a lot of them, and a lot of them, you know, they're completely insane. And they're looking at these little clips, and they're distorted in their own feminism, and maybe unconsciously they can't reconcile to the fact that they would actually want a man like you. I think that's a lot of what's going on.
My God. So that first bit, I was thinking, well, it's still unclear, because if I were treating someone like Andrew Tate, I don't know if I would, but it's possible I might word it like that, where in my head I'm like, oh no, I don't agree with this person's philosophy, but how do I word it in a way that is helpful? I have to say something here. And so I might say something like the way that he framed it at the beginning, where he's saying, well, you know, some women will distort feminism. It was something like that, where he said that, and will attack you. In that moment, I'm like, oh, what's going on here? But it was still possible that behind the scenes, David would say, well, many women and many people operating from a feminist perspective are attacking Andrew Tate in very legitimate ways. But some will misunderstand Andrew Tate in some ways and will attack him. And they're operating from what they think to be feminism, but they're just reacting to these little clips. They're not really taking the time to look into exactly what he's saying. There's criticizable things there that Andrew Tate's saying, but what some people are saying is easily refutable by anyone who knows Andrew Tate. And, you know, I imagine that might even be true. I don't know. So the first bit that he said, I was wondering, where are we? Then I don't think there's any universe in which anyone in David's shoes would say what he just said at the end there without being on board with what Andrew Tate is saying. There's so many underlying features to the indoctrination or the ideology for someone to say what David just said. I mean, there's so many problems with it. I don't even have to tell you, like, the ridiculous nature of it, the unscientific nature of it, the gross nature of it. Like, so women that are criticizing him want to have sex with him, want him as their husband. Wow, that's icky.
And they're distorted in their own feminism, and maybe unconsciously they can't reconcile to the fact that they would actually want a man like you. I think that's a lot of what's going on. It's like projection.
I'd agree with that.
You know, nevertheless, there is an energy that's like they want to get you. They want you to be punished.
Yeah, gross. I don't even know if I want to watch the rest of this. I've only watched 35 minutes. This thing is over 2 hours. I don't know if I can endure any more of this.
Like, how do you answer to that? Like, if that woman was sitting here, what do you say to her?
Yeah, I would say that her argument to a degree is a logic fail. Let's take it away from webcamming.
It's a female. Logic.
Yeah. Don't be a misogynist.
There's your blind spot right there.
Don't be a misogynist, but that's like saying because...
Wow. When Andrew Tate tells you don't be misogynistic, you know you have gone way beyond the threshold. He just said to David, don't be misogynistic. Wow. Yeah. Gross. Disgusting. And now I feel gross for even praising anything that this guy did. But, I said from the beginning, I have no idea who this guy is. He could be a deplorable human. I literally said that. I'm just reacting to what I'm seeing. And I will say that I have trained individuals who I would learn at some point had deplorable notions. I've trained hundreds, if not thousands of people. There's a bell curve of humans. So sometimes it happens, and it's still my job to train them. I also will gatekeep them, meaning that I will prevent them from entering the field if necessary. But if it's something, if I heard something like this I just can't imagine hearing that from a trainee, but there would be a lot of conversations before we did anything else, obviously. So I'm not talking about something like this. I'm talking about other kinds of problematic thinking. I think every human has some sort of problematic corner to their thinking because of our indoctrination into various different problematic, harmful, oppressive ideas about other groups of people. But anyway, he just said that basically that women can't be logical. God damn. It's so disgusting. And scientifically, empirically idiotic for him to say.
I think emotional vulnerability nearly at every form, at every level, is basically a form of manipulation. So
maybe that's just how you experienced it growing up.
Perhaps.
Was your mother emotional?
Okay, so now that I've noticed what it looks to me like David actually is in line with a lot of what Andrew Tate talks about, I'm having a hard time praising anything that David does, but I guess I was kind of doing that earlier with Andrew Tate. We can look at people and think you have highly problematic points of view and da-da-da-da. So with David right now, he is going after vulnerability and is doing it well, actually. Let's rewind.
So maybe that's just how you experienced it growing up.
Perhaps.
Right, because Andrew Tate is saying, look, when other people are vulnerable, then I think of it as a manipulation. And David says, well, it probably, David is saying, essentially, not directly, he's saying that's not logical, that's not right, that's not sound, that's not coherent, that point of view, that all emotional expressions are manipulation. And without saying that directly, though, he says, well, it's probably has to do with the way you were treated growing up. And that is, it's a little ham-fisted to say it that quickly because I don't know if Andrew Tate is ready for that. But, as a therapist, sometimes I'll do this. I'll think, well, this client isn't ready for this. Like, they're not going to respond well, or they're not going to go like, yes, or let me tell you a story of when I was a kid. But it's planting a seed. If there's enough of a bond, which it seems like there is, Because I think that not only did they have the podcast together, but I think they've hung out a lot. They seemingly they kind of refer to conversations that they've had. So, but I don't know. The way Andrew Tate reacts to David, it looks very different than the way Andrew Tate has reacted to other people. So I suspect that he likes David and David likes him. So independent of their pseudo-therapy relationship. So for David, though, he says, well, it probably comes from when you're growing up. Let's see how Andrew Tate responds.
Mother emotionally manipulative?
No, but if a girl cried in front of me, I believe she'd be trying to get an out. I don't think it's just because she feels bad. I think it's because she's trying to get a reaction from me. And I think when men cry to their wives or whatever, a lot of it is trying to inspire sympathy from her. I think a lot of emotional vulnerability.
Well, yes and no. Yeah, I guess verbatim what you're saying, Andrew Tate, is true. That is the purpose, typically, of crying. It's also just a natural reaction, like being hungry or being thirsty or being tired. That doesn't have a conscious goal in mind. But in my belief, we did evolve crying and spewing water and snot out of our face and convulsing so that people will notice when we're feeling that emotion, such that it'll provoke sympathy and care, and they will go over to. And by the way, on the internet for the last 20 years, people will say that sympathy is bad and empathy is good. And maybe you don't believe that, but I just want to dispel that. Both are good. And there's a lot of different definitions, but generally speaking, sympathy is when you care for someone, but you're not necessarily feeling their emotions. It's a very simple way of putting it. So if someone were to, like when I hear about war happening and people being hurt or losing loved ones, I might not in that moment feel their feelings because I'm not close enough to them, or I haven't heard enough of that particular person's news story to resonate with them. But I do have sympathy. I care. I have compassion. And I might be motivated by that sympathy to do a lot of things like vote or give to charities or something. Whereas if I were to hear a story and about someone experiencing war who were to tell me what they were going through, like a kid that's crying or something, then I might both feel sympathy and empathy because I'm now crying, or I'm feeling the pain, or it's resonating with some experience that I have. And I'm feeling their feelings. And also I have compassion, and the compassion comes just from my values, but also it comes from the fact that I am now feeling their feelings, because it's human to do that in a lot of situations. But anyway, my point is that, well, what was he saying?
Because she's trying to get a reaction from me. And I think when men cry to their wives or whatever, a lot of it is trying to inspire sympathy from her.
Right. So I think that we evolved. There's no way to know this scientifically, but a lot of evidence is pointing in the direction that we evolved this response of crying when we are hurt and sad as a way of provoking others to have sympathy and or empathy for us. And then they come to us and they can help us, not only just make us feel like we're not alone, but also they might be, if a kid falls down and hurts themselves, they bang up their knee and they start to cry, they might not notice the falling, but they will hear the crying, and then they will go to the child and help the child, emotional and physical ways, right? So we do that all the time. So what he's saying, though, is that it's a bad thing that crying would hopefully provoke. When I cry, I am hoping that people will have sympathy for me. But the way he frames it, it's this really manipulative thing. And David is, I think, hypothesizing that distortion, that self-delusion, that wrong way of thinking, prevents him from being vulnerable, but also is just not philosophically sound, because you're not going to react to other people in coherent ways. Someone cries, like, I think does he have kids? Oh, right. I think he said earlier that he did have kids. And according to the U.S. Sun, it says, quote, he has never given a specific number, but has stated that he has double-digit amounts of kids. Well, maybe he's a loving father.
But there is a way, right, that you have a tactic. You're trying to control things. You're trying to get away from something. You're trying to control the conversation on some level.
Of course.
But what if you gave that up?
Well, okay.
Give it up.
I'm trying.
So I don't know what David is thinking here, but this is another common therapy technique, that if you're bumping up against a defense as a therapist, there's a lot of different angles that you can come at to help the individual either know they have a defense or discard it so that they can be a human being and so that you can actually help someone. The defense is a part of it, of course. We don't want to just say that's a bad thing, we need to get rid of it. But as a part of the therapy, as a therapist, instead of just saying, stop being defensive. So I think that what David is trying to do is say that, okay, Andrew, you are using a lot of defenses to avoid being vulnerable and to acknowledge that you have a lot of vulnerability. And so I think that is harming you. I think that's what David's hypothesis is, because David isn't very sneaky about, which I think is a good thing. I mean, there's different styles of therapy, but anyway, so I think that's what his driving force is, his hypothesis. And so one way to get at that defense is to say, what if, is to identify it. So he says, you're very controlling of the conversation. And he's being not harsh about it, but he's basically stating that. And then he's saying, what if you gave up that control? What would happen? Now, it can be perceived as if David is asking a question like, hey, Andrew, give up that defense. But that usually isn't the purpose. The purpose is to just have the individual look at their defense, for the individual to be like, well, what would happen? Because often people will catastrophize. They will say, well, if I give up control over the conversation, then very bad things will happen. And so you say, well, what bad thing would happen? They would say, well, I don't know. I just feel like something really bad would happen. Okay, well, what though? And at the end of the road, the client discovers, I guess there really isn't any. I just feel like there's something bad that would happen, but I know that I can trust you. And even if you were to hurt my feelings, I know I can survive that. So it's weird that I have that fear, probably from my childhood, that I just assume to indicate danger, but actually there is no danger. So that's often what people are getting at. I wonder if that's what's happening here.
I'm trying to be as vulnerable as possible, but when we
but theory, like just the idea of it, right? Like what would happen if?
Let's do it. I'm trying my very best. Old habits die hard.
But don't worry about the result. Just
Yeah. So I'm having a hard time saying anything about these two, given their extremely misogynistic points of view. But that was a good step. If I had a client like Andrew and he said that, I would say, okay, I'm building rapport. He feels safe enough with me that he is able to respond to me confronting him about his defense of control and not being vulnerable. He's saying, essentially, Andrew Tate just admitted he has a problem. Old habits die hard. He's essentially saying, I have a problem that needs to change. He's not saying this overtly, but it's implied. And it's a big deal that if a client says that, it's like, okay, wow. In fact, if I heard that, I wouldn't actually continue to go down this road as David is. I mean, I don't know Andrew the way David does, but my style is I would really highlight that when I'm at my best. I'm not always at my best, but I would really highlight that. If I had a client say, old habits die hard, I would screech to a halt where I was headed, and I'd be like, what did you just tell me more? Wow, that's a huge statement. What do you mean by that? Old habits die hard. What were you meaning by that? Because, it's for him to say that, there could be a whole paragraph. Now, in all likelihood, Andrew would right turn and make it into something that he's winning about, and it's all about competition. But at the very least, I would be planting a seed that was a big deal. When I have had that happen to me as a client myself, when a therapist really goes, whoa, what? When that happens, I tend to remember those moments. Later, whether it's the next day or the next year, I'll remember like, oh yeah, remember when my therapist really like kind of freaked out in a positive way when I said that one thing? It's a way of emphasizing something. It's also a way of slowing things down, because a lot of things can happen. Sometimes as a therapist, you want something to breathe. It's like, let's not make that just 1 second. Let's actually turn that into 5 minutes of like, let's really honor and think about and explore what you meant by that, especially when the client offers it up, right? It's one thing for a therapist to be like, let's think about it. It's another thing when a client like, boom, and as a therapist, you're just asking a client to reflect on what they said, which is not, you're no longer involved in it. They're just talking to themselves and directing that, right? Instead of you trying to introduce something and inject an idea into their minds. All right, well, let's adjourn there. Tune in next time when I continue watching if you care to. And everyone, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.